A serene morning in the late Cretaceous period. Giant dinosaurs are roaming a vibrant landscape of ferns and flowering plants. In a few moments, this ordinary day will turn into Earth's darkest hour. High above the atmosphere, an asteroid the size of a mountain hurtles toward the planet at tremendous speed. Without warning, a blinding fireball streaks across the sky, brighter and larger than the sun itself. In the next instant, the asteroid slams into Earth with cataclysmic force, releasing energy greater than that of 1,000,000 nuclear bombs. The impactor gouges out a crater over 100 miles, instantly vaporizing rock and water. From the impact site on the Yucatan Peninsula, a plume of molten debris and superheated gases blasts through the atmosphere and into space. Within seconds, an incomprehensible shock wave explodes outward. The ground heaves and rolls like a mega earthquake, shaking the entire globe. Near ground zero, everything is instantly annihilated. Trees in the forest explode from the heat, and solid rock liquefies under extreme temperature and pressure. Even the air catches fire. Any creatures nearby, herds of triceratops, hunting tyrannosaurs, a tiny mammalism, the undergrowth, they were there one moment and the next they were gone, erased by the immense blast. Farther away, hundreds of miles from the epicenter, dinosaurs are knocked off their feet by a supersonic wall of air and debris sweeping over the land. Trees crack and fly apart like twigs. The shock wave continues, flattening forest into radial patterns like the aftermath of an atomic bomb. Even on distant continents, the earth shakes. Landslides fall from mountains as the impact pulse spreads around the world. In the ocean, devastation comes just as swiftly. The impact partially strikes shallow seas, displacing an unimaginable volume of water. For the next several hours, mega tsunamis hundreds of meters high radiate outward. A wall of ocean water smashes into coastlines from the Gulf of Mexico to faraway shores. Along what is now the North American coastline, water floods everything in sight, rushing inland, then surging back out to sea, dragging dinosaurs and uprooted trees with it. 10 hours after the impact, massive tsunami waves strike the shores thousands of miles away. Coastlines across the world are transformed as the seafloor rises and giant waves scour everything clean. Ancient marine reptiles and fish like driftwood are flung ashore into frothing, foam-filled seas. After the waves retreat, coastal regions are unrecognizable. Ocean sand covers what used to be forests, and twisted remains of trees and animals lie in chaotic heaps. Minutes or hours after the collision, fire begins to pour from the sky. The explosion launched billions of tons of molten rock and dust into the upper atmosphere. Now drawn back by gravity, the ejected debris begins to fall. White, hot shooting stars streak across the sky by the millions as if a meteor storm had engulfed the entire planet. These fiery stones aren't ordinary meteors, they're slower, but all survive the descent into the lower atmosphere. As they fall, some as small as pebbles, others as large as boulders, each becomes an incandescent torch overheating the air. For several hours, Earth is bathed in this intense infrared heat pulse from returning ejecta. All over the globe, exposed vegetation spontaneously ignites under this thermal radiation. Animals caught in the open burn alive within minutes. A hadrosaur running across a meadow doesn't stand a chance. The very air shimmers with lethal heat. The creature collapses, destroyed by the searing temperature. Only those that hide underground or in water are protected from the worst of this thermal assault. Everyone else, even creatures thousands of miles from the impact site, feels the fire raining from above. By the end of the first few hours, Earth is a planet on fire. Wildfires rage across nearly every continent, turning the lush jungles of the Cretaceous into blazing infernos. Towering plumes of smoke join the dust already filling the upper atmosphere. Daylight gives way to twilight as the sun disappears behind a veil of ash. Within mere hours, most life on Earth has died in this initial onslaught. Once dominant dinosaurs and countless other species lie dead or dying, their 170 million year reign effectively ended in a single day. But these immediate horrors of the impact are only the beginning. The planet is poised to enter a much longer period of darkness and devastation. So in the first few days after the impact, the world remains shrouded in darkness. Sunlight struggles to pierce through the suffocating veil of ash and stone dust that now encircles the entire globe. In some places, a ghastly twilight glow lingers even at noon, cast by a sky that turned copper. Initially, temperatures remain abnormally high due to the thermal pulse and ongoing fires, but the intense heat of the firestorm phase soon gives way to a stark, soul-chilling darkness. Soot and dust have blocked out the sun, and a deep shadow falls upon the earth, something between twilight and a moonless night, lit only by the orange glow of distant wildfires. In the sedimentary deposits from that time, a layer of soot and charcoal can be found across the world, having settled in thick drifts over the ruins of the Cretaceous ecosystem. In what is now North America, gray-black ash covers the ground, burying charred ferns and the burned carcasses of dinosaurs. The air reeks of smoke, dust, and death. In these first days, the global fires begin to extinguish themselves, simply because there's almost nothing left to burn. Entire forests turned into blackened stumps and glowing embers. Here and there on the ashen ground lie the motionless silhouettes of once mighty dinosaurs. A triceratops, having survived the initial blast, wanders through a scorched grove, its skin blistered, its eyes clouded with ash. Disoriented in the eternal gloom, it instinctively calls out, but in this silent, charred world, there is no familiar answer. Weakened by injury and poisoned air, the massive beast staggers and collapses into the ash drifts. The atmosphere itself is in turmoil. Towering thunderclouds, heavy with ash and soot, gather above the scorched earth. Lightning constantly flashes across the blackened sky, igniting new blazes even as rain begins to fall. But this is not life-giving rain. Instead, it is thick and acidic. The soot and sulfurous particles from the impact have turned the precipitation into acid. These black rains fall intermittently, forming toxic puddles that hiss as they eat into the soil and stone. Rivers and lakes are tainted with sludge, mud, and charred debris. Any remaining plants that had not yet burned now wither under the onslaught of acid and lack of sunlight. Meanwhile, the ground continues to tremble from powerful aftershocks. The colossal impact not only generated shock waves at the moment of collision, but continues to agitate the Earth's crust. For days, possibly weeks, the land rarely remains still. Each aftershock sends fresh landslides down already damaged hillsides and triggers small tsunamis that ripple across churning oceans. The planet, quite literally, is reeling from the aftermath. On land, every creature that somehow survived the initial hours is now in a desperate struggle. Modern simulations have shown that the darkness persisted day after day. meaning that no plant could carry out photosynthesis. Once lush Cretaceous landscapes quickly turned barren. In a burrow, a small, shrew-like mammal has survived the hellish fires thanks to its underground shelter, and it cautiously emerges into the murky daylight in search of food. The sky occasionally releases fine dust and tiny droplets of molten rock. The mammal scrambles over the corpse of a dinosaur, searching for edible scraps among the cooling ash, and finds very little. In the distance lies an Edmontosaurus, duck-billed herbivore, still alive, but barely. Its flesh is burned and each breath draws in more ash. There are no ferns, no leaves, only the bitter taste of soot. Within a day or two, this 5-ton dinosaur, like so many others, finally dies in the dark, poisoned world. Across the globe, the once dominant creatures of the late Cretaceous die out en masse. Their food sources vanished and the world changed beyond recognition. By the end of the first few days, the entire surface of the Earth has essentially become a disaster zone. The wildfires have mostly burned themselves out, but not before filling the atmosphere with billions of tons of soot. The sun remains hidden behind this dense stratospheric haze, and even at midday, the planet is cloaked in a dusty twilight. The stage is set for a much longer global catastrophe, a prolonged impact winter that will claim even more life in the coming weeks. According to scientists, the peak eclipse phase began within weeks after the impact and lasted for months. During this time, the world plunged into a deep freeze. With sunlight blocked, surface temperatures dropped sharply. Daytime highs that once were pleasantly warm now hovered near freezing in many regions. The nighttime cold was even more severe, made worse by the complete lack of solar heat. In areas that were once tropical, each morning now brought a thin layer of frost settling on the ashen soil. This impact winter wrapped the planet in a cold darkness and unforgiving environment where only a few creatures could survive. Plants died off en masse across the globe. Grasses, flowers, and leaves either burned or withered in the sunless gloom. Photosynthesis had nearly ceased, destroying the foundation of the food chain. In the oceans, algae and phytoplankton, microscopic marine plants, they perished without sunlight, triggering the collapse of marine ecosystems. A chain reaction of extinction gathered momentum. Giants that had survived the initial chaos, if there were any, now fell victim to starvation and cold. One by one, species that had flourished for millions of years vanished. The enormous Titanosaur, once a 30-ton giant, weakened as its energy reserves ran out. Alongside a few others like it, it wandered the desolate plains, searching in vain for vegetation. Now its colossal skeleton lies on the ground, dusted with ash. Carnivorous dinosaurs fared no better, facing starvation also, alone, weakened, and emaciated. Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex predator of the age, stood still in a world where there was nothing left to hunt. The situation in the water is just as dire. Vast collections of rotting plants and corpses are carried down via rivers into the ocean. Seas that once teemed with life had become water graveyards in places. Oxygen levels fell as decomposition consumed what little could still be produced through photosynthesis. Coral reefs bleach and die, along with many fish in the cooling dark oceans. The great marine reptiles of the Cretaceous, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, had mostly already perished either from the initial shock or from the collapse of the marine food web. Even the once abundant ammonites, mollusks with spiral shells, were nowhere to be found. Their kind did not survive the disaster. On a starlit beach far from the impact site, a giant sea turtle crawled ashore amid the debris, and somehow had survived the aftermath, perhaps by hiding in the depths. It laid eggs under a sky it could no longer see, guided by instinct. But in the weeks after the impact, many of these nests would be lost. The colder temperatures and ecological turmoil were no help to reproduction. In the utter darkness, the resilience of life was put to the test. Only the small, the adaptive, or the lucky ones managed to find refuge. Some feisty mammals and reptiles remained underground for long periods, feeding on the stores of food or the bodies of dead insects. A few hardy crocodiles and turtles survived by slowing their metabolism, burrowing into the mud or sheltering underground. In a damp burrow in the territory of what is now Asia, a clutch of frog eggs survived thanks to the insulating effect of the mud protecting them from all the temperature swings. Insects that fed on dead matter like beetles and larvae still found food in this vast graveyard, allowing some of them to persist even after the herbivores disappeared. Fungi and mold spread rapidly, thriving on the abundance of decaying organic material. These saprophytes needed no sunlight, which allowed them to flourish in the eternal night. In fact, the only visible green in many areas wasn't green at all, but a fluffy white carpet of fungus consuming what had once been living tissue. Weeks pass, and the mass extinction reaches its peak. A massive percentage of Earth's species had been wiped out by the combined forces of fire, darkness, cold, and starvation. By some estimates, nearly 3/4 of all species are now gone. The mighty dinosaurs, except for a few surviving birds, are no more. Entire families of reptiles, mammals, birds, insects, and plants had been erased in what was practically an instant on a geological timescale. A dreadful silence reigns over the land. The constant hum, chirping, and roaring of the late Cretaceous had gone quiet. If you stood in what was once a vibrant Cretaceous forest, all you would hear now is the moaning of a cold wind through blackened trees and the distant rumble of the occasional storm. The age of the dinosaurs ended in darkness and ice. But even in this bleak time, not all life was extended. Scattered here and there were the seeds of what would eventually rebuild everything. The small and clever kept going. The worst of the cataclysm was over, and now the survivors faced the slow challenge of restoring life over the coming months and years. A few months after the impact, the impenetrable darkness begins to slowly dissipate. Dust and soot in the upper layers of the atmosphere gradually settle. Here and there, pale sunlight breaks through the thinning clouds, revealing the devastation below in minute detail. It will take several more years for the sky to fully clear, but the process has already begun. As sunlight gradually strengthens, the frigid weather conditions begin to ease slightly. Daytime temperatures slowly rise from near freezing levels to more tolerable values, at least near the equator. The sun, though still weak and hazy, begins to bring a hint of warmth to the surface battered by cold. In some places, the eternal twilight gives way to a grim, overcast day. The creatures that survived the dark weeks now cautiously emerge into this new, altered world. With the return of sunlight, plants begin to push through hesitantly. The earth, though devastated, is not without hope. Dormant seeds left in the soil now sense warmth and moisture and begin to germinate. Often the pioneers in such cases are ferns and other hardy terrestrial plants that can quickly grow in nutrient-rich post-fire soil. Later fossil records will show many regions experience a so-called fern spike. Ferns cover the landscape during the early stages of recovery. They thrive thanks to the abundance of minerals in the ash and the lack of competition. Alongside them, fungi continues to break down tons of dead organic matter, further enriching the soil. In the burned forest that was once part of Laramidia, the western portion of North America, the forest floor was already green with a layer of ferns just a few months after the disaster. These low plants stabilized the soil, and they paved the way for other vegetation. Nearby, the charred stump of a cycad miraculously sprouts new shoots from its base. Some forms of life prove resilient enough to grow even after being burned. Slowly, but surely, hints of green return to the brown-black landscape. Surviving animals begin to reappear and spread through the nascent post-impact ecosystems. In the absence of giant dinosaurs, small creatures take center stage. Mammals, once secondary players, now emerge into a world almost devoid of competitors. By dinosaur standards, these survivors are tiny, most of them no bigger than a house cat, and many are mouse-sized. For example, early Paleocene mammals like Purgatorius, a primitive primate-like creature about 6 inches long, and Mesadma, a rodent-like multituberculate, were already around at the end of the Cretaceous and managed to survive the catastrophe, as evidenced by their fossils found on both sides of the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. Their small size and behavior helped them survive. They needed less food, could hide easily, and some adapted to eating a wide range of things. Thanks to this, shortly after the dinosaurs' extinction, these rat-like mammals filled the empty ecological niches. Their descendants include all modern mammals, including us. In the undergrowth of a regenerating forest, a rat-sized mammal climbs over fallen logs in search of insects or carrion. It finds a beetle nest feasting on the decaying carcass of a triceratops and eagerly devours them. Nearby, a lizard warms itself on a heated rock. Reptiles that survived the cold weeks now welcome the returning warmth. Crocodiles that made it through by hiding in water and mud crawl back into warm rivers, ready to hunt surviving fish. At that time, there were relatively small crocodiles about 6 to 10 feet long, such as Borealisuchus, Diosaurus, and Brachychampsa, whose remains have also been found on both sides of the extinction boundary. The skies are no longer ruled by pterosaurs. They're gone. However, it marks the appearance of birds. The only dinosaurs to survive the extinction were their avian relatives, Aali, hardy, ground-dwelling birds that managed to make it through the long night. When the forest burned, the survivors were those who lived on the ground and could feed on seeds and insects. And now, months later, their descendants feed in open areas along riverbanks. One can imagine a few bird calls finally breaking the long silence that followed the impact. Ecosystems begin to gradually recover from the ground up. In the oceans, sunlight reaching the surface allows algae to bloom again, providing food for small marine animals and gradually restoring marine food chains. On land, pollinating and decomposing insects multiply, taking advantage of the rebounding plant life and abundant detritus. Beetles, ants, and flies reproduce in the leaf litter and fresh soil. Amphibians seek out rejuvenated bodies of water in ponds. Creatures like small salamanders and frogs, some of which survive by burrowing into the mud, now emerge to lay eggs in the new waters. And although biodiversity is just a fraction of what it once was, it's steadily increasing. A simplified food web emerges. Ferns and hardy shrubs are eaten by insects and a few surviving herbivores, such as small turtles or iguanas, which are in turn preyed upon by small mammals or snakes. It's now a world of small creatures where resilience and adaptability matter more than brute size. In a nutrient-rich river delta, willow-like plants and palms begin to grow along with herbivorous fauna. Life quietly recovers among the cracks of destruction. Approaching several months after the impact, Earth is beginning to heal, though it still bears its scars. The sky, still overcast, has become lighter than it was in the first weeks. Rain has washed a significant amount of ash from the air, and now from time to time patches of blue sky even appear. The climate is gradually beginning to change again. Where it was once cold and bleak, it may soon shift into a warmer greenhouse phase due to the carbon dioxide released by fires and decomposing matter. For now, the surviving forms of life make use of every clear day and every faint ray of sunlight to feed, grow, and reproduce. These humble survivors are writing the first chapter of a new era. Over time, they will diversify and once again fill Earth with an abundance of life. 66 million years ago, one catastrophic event nearly sterilized our planet. The aftermath of the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs was a grim and brutal natural disaster, unparalleled in scale. A planetary nightmare that lasted for years. In that time, Earth changed from a lush paradise of giants to a shadow-covered world ruled by fire and ice. And yet, even in the face of near total annihilation, life found a way to survive and recover. The catastrophe ended the age of dinosaurs, but it also cleared the path for a new evolutionary dawn. Tiny burrowing mammals, resilient birds, hardy reptiles, and amphibians. These unassuming creatures inherited the changed world. In the vacuum left by extinction, they slowly spread and evolved, giving rise to new dynasties of life during the Paleogene period. Earth itself gradually recovered. Over many years and decades, sunlight fully returned, the climate stabilized, then warmed, and forests began to grow again. Not as they had before, but thriving nonetheless. What had once been the KG impact scar at Chicxulub eventually vanished beneath the jungle and ocean, leaving only a thin layer of iridium-rich clay in the geological record as a memorial to that fateful event. In the millennia that followed, ecosystems around the globe regained astonishing complexity, and millions of years later, the descendants of survivors repopulated the rejuvenated planet with new species. The end of one era became the beginning of another. In this cycle of destruction and renewal, we witnessed the extraordinary resilience of life on Earth. The asteroid's aftermath was unimaginably harsh. Fiery rain from the sky, darkness that froze the world, and an extinction event that wiped out the vast majority of species. But it was not the end of the story. From fragile beginnings, life bloomed again, ultimately leading to the rich and diverse world we know today. And the legacy of that catastrophe lives on to this day, in every bird that takes flight, and in every mammal that walks the earth, including you and I.